So I'm glad that through the wonder of technology that I still get to teach you today, because I've been so looking forward to this lesson. I'm one of those guys when I work out a series, I pretty much put my favorite lesson near the end, because if I do it at the front, I get bored with what I'm teaching before I get to the end of it. So this is the one I really want to get to you today, and we're going to talk about how do you shut down the crazy makers in your life. And I could give you a list of, I don't know, maybe 100 different kind of crazy makers that we have in life. But for the sake of time, just kind of to set the stage today, real quickly, I just want to give you a half dozen of what I think are the most common ones. So in your notes, if you want to follow along with me, 6 common crazy makers we can beat. And I want you to understand, you can beat these guys. I mean, you just can. So don't give up. And that's why I picked these. I want you to understand you can beat them. And then in a minute, we're going to talk about how to beat them. All right. So here's the first one. A, the demanding crazy makers. The demanding crazy makers. These are those little dictators in life. They're bossy, they're pushy, they're controlling, they're intimidating. They dominate every conversation. They can take anything that happens and come right back and make it about them, you know. And they turn every conversation you have into a power struggle. And then they make all these really unrealistic demands on your life and on your time and on your schedule and on your emotions. And you probably have somebody in mind already who that person is, right? Let's look at the next kind. B, the disapproving crazy makers. Now, these are the nitpickers that if you have got white teeth, your teeth are still not white enough. If you have ironed your shirt, it is still not wrinkle-free enough. And they are always ready to point out that the best that you've got to offer, well, it's just not the best that there is. And certainly you could have done better, you know. And so they like to point out your shortcomings, and they always counter anything you say. These are the people we talk about. I like to call yabbits. No matter what you say, their response is always, yeah, but that's disapproving crazy makers. Now here's the next one. C, the deafening crazy makers. Now, these deafening ones, the reason they're deafening is because they never shut up. I mean, their mouths go on, and they never give them any rest. And they're always talking about themselves, and they just continue to go, and they continue to bellow. And then, even beyond that, they love to debate. So this is like the next level above the yeah, but. These won't just tell you, you know, yeah, but. These want to argue with you about it. This kind of person, man, these deafening crazy makers, their social skills, so as far as social skills go, they are bankrupt. They're at a deficit. But they just keep talking at you until you either agree or surrender. All right, here's the next one, D, the destructive crazy makers. Now, these are those crazy makers you have in your life who, you know, they'll let you go along and you think everything's fine, and then just all of a sudden it's just kaboosh, and there's this giant mushroom cloud that forms over them. That's how they are with their anger. They're just like Mount St. Helens. They're going to blow, and when they go, it's going to throw a lot of dirt in the air. You don't know when it's going to happen, but you know it's going to happen at some point. There's no rhyme to it. There's no reason to it. They just blow up, and they burn everything in their path. Yeah, and so what you end up doing is whenever you're around them, you're quiet, you don't make eye contact, or you tiptoe around like you're walking on eggshells all the time. And there's a lot of tension around those people, and people who get hurt by them, well, the burn casualties are pretty high. All right, next one's the discontented crazy makers. The discontented crazy makers. So these are people who they always get their feelings hurt. No matter what happens, they always get their feelings hurt. They're very touchy. They're very thin-skinned. They whine a lot. They're the chronic complainers. And I don't like this, and I don't like that, and why not this, and why do we have to do that? And they've got this martyr complex that makes it so that even the sound of their voice just like grates on your ears. Yeah. Yeah, we're probably thinking about some of the same people. Okay. F, the demeaning crazy makers. Now, Demeaning crazy makers, these are people, they've got sharp tongues, they've got a nasty mouth on them, they're rude, they're insulting, their language is caustic, it burns to even listen to them. They love to smash your dreams, they love to tear you down, they get a particular joy out of telling you how you don't measure up, and they can be disrespectful, and they can be petty, and they can be mean, and they just suck the life out of you. So how do you defend against these kind of people? I mean, what do you do with that? How do we block their poison, their toxicity, and then limit the damage it can cause to us? Well, what I want to do, I want to take you through a summary of some Bible verses. We're going to look at 6 of them. 6 steps, basically, on how to deal with difficult people. And I'll tell you what, these steps, we're going to start with the easiest one, and as we go, by the time we get to the 6th one, we're at the toughest one to do. They just get progressively harder. But I'll tell you, if you'll do these things and you'll do them consistently, you will cut down on the crazy makers in your life. All right, so how do we deal with these people? All right, step number 1, here we go. Refuse to be offended. Don't let them get under your skin. What I mean is, don't take their behavior personally. I mean, even if they intend it personally, don't take it personally. No matter what they say, no matter how outrageous their behavior is, no matter how they insult you, no matter what their body language is, no matter how they come at you, understand this. They are revealing something about themselves. They're not revealing a thing about you. What they're doing is they're revealing about themselves. They're not telling you what's in you. They're telling you what's in them. It doesn't say anything about you. It tells you who they are. It tells you what their problem is. So don't be offended by that. Now, that's easier said than done, right? So how do I keep from taking personal offense at the crazy makers in my life? All right, in your notes, Proverbs chapter 12, verse 16. A fool is quick-tempered, but now circle this, what kind of person? A wise person stays calm when insulted. So he says, if you're wise, you just ignore the insult. See, if you respond to an insult with an insult, he says, you're a fool. So they snap at you. If you snap back at them, it says, you're showing that you're a fool. Because foolish people get what foolish people put out. In fact, we have an old saying, right? What goes around comes around. See, that's for fools. But a wise person knows how to break out of that cycle. A wise person ignores an insult. Why? Why do they ignore it? Because they know to look behind the insult. Now, we've talked about this several times in this series. When you're dealing with someone who is hurting you, when you're dealing with someone who is offensive and coming at you, when you're dealing with people who are irritating, when you're dealing with those people who are crazy makers in your life, you've got to look past the pain and see what's motivating them. Because we're all motivated by something. And when people are hurting, it's because they're hurting on the inside. And it comes out and it's on display on their outside. So the more that you understand about a person's background, the more grace you're going to be able to show to them. Look at Proverbs 19:11. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. So you don't get offended. Why? What's it say in the verse? Wisdom gives him patience. So when you understand somebody's background, when you understand their current stress, it's easier to show grace at someone who is hurt than grace to someone you don't like. That gives you patience and you overlook the offense. So that's the very first step you've got to take. I've got to intentionally choose to refuse to take up the offense. I'm just not going to take it personal. All right, now step number 2. Don't wait for an apology. Don't wait for an apology to forgive. Now, a lot of us, we've got some crazy makers in our lives who've done some crazy, hurtful, painful, nasty things to us, or even worse, they've done those things to the people that we love. You know, you can hurt me and, you know, I can look at you and most of the time I can see your pain and not take all that personal, you know. I mean, I still take it a little personal, but not take it so totally personal. But I'll tell you what, you hurt my wife, you hurt one of my daughters, you hurt one of my sons, and we're going to war because I'm not going to put up with that, right? See, that's how we do, right? That's what we think. Yet what we've got to understand is Christ calls us to forgiveness. Now, the problem when we say Christ calls us to forgiveness is we say things like this. Now, I know the Christian thing is for me to forgive, and I will, and I'll forgive them as soon as they give me an apology, as soon as they apologize, as soon as they make the right kind of approach to me, then I'll forgive them. Well, the problem with that is that if you're thinking that, you're still holding on to the hurt. They're still living in your life. They're in your head rent-free. They've got an address right at the top of your shoulders. And the challenge for that is that these guys, they may never ask for your forgiveness. They may not even realize they need forgiven. They may never say, I'm so sorry for what I did. It may be because, well, they're a crazy maker and they have no real awareness of how they affect the people around them. I mean, we all know people like that. So you end up stewing over a resentment and you end up holding on to something that may have been so long ago that they don't remember it, or so just natural in their life out of pain that they don't even realize they did it. So what do? I know Dr. Laura says you don't have to forgive anyone that hasn't apologized. That's not true. Forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for you. Colossians 3. Circle these first two words. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you. Oh, underline the whole last sentence. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you should forgive others. Is that what it says? So you could forgive others, so you ought to forgive others. What's it say? No, you must. You don't have another option in this. Where it says make allowance, those first two words we circled. Those were Greek. That was a Greek phrase that meant to bear with, to endure, to tolerate. Basically what it means is you learn to cut people some slack. All right, step number 3. Refuse to gossip about them. Refuse to gossip about them. I mean, let's just admit it. When you have some crazy maker in your life and they have done the craziest stupid thing and it has offended you and they've gone and they've done it again, it is almost impossible to not go to somebody nearby and say, you will not believe what that fool just did, right? Maybe you text it, maybe you email it, maybe you Skype it. Maybe just go to the water machine. I don't know. Watch this from Proverbs 17:9. Whoever forgives someone's sin makes a friend, but gossiping about the sin breaks up friendships. So what's gossip? Well, I know one definition of gossip is when you hear something you like about someone you don't like. I know another definition of gossip is sharing information with someone who is not part of the solution or part of the problem. So when you gossip, you involve someone who might not have even been present or had anything to do about it, but you bring them into the circle so you can tear down someone else so that you can feel taller. I mean, let's just face it, gossip in its most simple essence is just a form of retaliation that someone can't defend against because they're not present. I mean, you're getting back at them without talking to them, without touching them. Oh, instead you're talking about them behind their back. Listen, I'll tell you, gossip is incredibly destructive. I mean, gossip is incredibly destructive to churches. It's incredibly destructive to families. It's incredibly destructive to marriages. It's incredibly destructive to businesses. It will tear up your life. I mean, it will separate the closest of friends. A loose word spoken here to someone else will separate you from someone that you truly do love. And maybe the worst thing about gossip is when we start gossiping about the crazy maker. Maybe the worst thing about that is that they've actually won because they're controlling our time. They're controlling our discussion. They're controlling what we talk about. They're controlling what we think about. They're in absolute control of it because we're talking about them. They are the subject. Listen, don't let them win. Do not let your crazy maker win. It's time to evict them. 1 Peter chapter 3. Do not do wrong to repay a wrong, and do not insult to repay an insult. That's what gossip is, right? It's an insult behind the back. But repay with a blessing. Oh, no, wait a minute. Why am I? Somebody does something bad to me. I'm supposed to do something nice to them when they do something bad for me. I'm supposed to repay them with a blessing. What's that about? Well, here he says, because you yourselves were called to do this so that you might receive a blessing. Again, forgiveness from you toward them isn't for them. I mean, they get a benefit from it ultimately, but it's for you. You get the bigger benefit. All right, step number 4. Refuse to play the game. Don't play their games. I mean, do not play their games. Crazy makers love to argue and they love to debate because it gets you completely 100% focused on them and their discussion and their intellectual prowess or whatever, and it makes them feel empowered. I forget who it was that said it. They said, never argue with a fool because a fool will drag you down to his level and beat you with experience every time. Listen, you don't get involved in debates with fools because as you talk with them, you actually start to convince yourself, I think if they could just hear my side, I could just reason with them just a little bit. I could help them out. Listen, you can't help them out because they are sick in the head. It's like I think it was Winston Churchill maybe that said, a bulldog can whip a skunk anytime, but it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it to engage them in debate. See, to engage someone in debate means that you believe they came to their position from some kind of logical reason. But crazy makers don't come to their position through reason. They come to it through emotion. So talking them through reason doesn't work. You can't talk people out of a behavior they didn't. There's no reasoning. There's no brains involved in it. They get into that behavior because of an emotion, not because of a thought, not because of healthy thinking. Thomas Paine, remember that guy from the American Revolution? He said, to argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. In other words, he says, it's a waste of your breath to do it. Proverbs 26:21. Just as charcoal and wood keep a fire going, a quarrelsome person keeps an argument going. So you don't play the game. You don't get drawn into it. Don't get hooked into it. You cut them off. Proverbs 22:19. Throw out the mocker and you will be rid of what? Of tension, of fightings, of quarrels. Do you ever have someone in your office who they call in sick and suddenly the whole day in the office is an amazing day? You can get rid of that person in your life altogether. Don't play the game. Don't participate. All right? Step number 5. Refuse to cave in. When you decide you're not going to play the game, they're going to start coming at you, trying to force the game on you. Don't cave in. Do not allow them to manipulate your life. Listen, love is not going to attempt to manipulate you. Love is also not allowing other people to manipulate you. That's unloving to you. That's also unloving to God. It's unloving to the people who manipulate you. Love is not giving in to manipulation. Romans chapter 14. Do not allow what you consider good to be spoken of as evil. For example, let's say you're asked to violate your conscience at work and you know it's wrong. What are you going to do? Are you going to feel pressured? Are you going to be manipulated into violating your conscience? What are you going to do? That's what he's talking about. They're going to press you. They're going to lean on you. They're going to put weight on you. And he's saying, don't cave in when that happens. The Apostle Paul started a church in a place called Corinth in Greece. And he wrote 2 letters to them. They had written him letters, and we kind of see what they had written to him by the answers that he gives to them. But those letters, we call them, they're in the New Testament, we call them 1st and 2nd Corinthians. The first one being, guess what? The first letter, and the second one being the second letter that he wrote to them. And he chides these Corinthians because they're caving into bullies in the church. Now watch what he says, 2 Corinthians 11. You put up with it when someone enslaves you, takes everything you have, takes advantage of you, takes control of everything, and slaps you in the face. I'm ashamed to say that we've been too weak to do that. So he says, you stand up for what's right. You don't cave in. He says, don't confuse turning the other cheek with caving in. All right? They're not the same thing. Turning the other cheek is a choice of love to not retaliate. Not caving in is refusing to participate in the sin. All right? That brings us to the sixth thing. Step number 6. Always take the high ground. Always take the high ground. You always choose you are going to do the right thing, whether they decide they're going to do the right thing or not. So if they insult you, you treat them with kindness. You know, if they're unloving to you, you be loving to them. If they're resentful to you, you be forgiving to them. If they're being mean to you, you be nice to them. And you take the high ground no matter what the crazy makers do. You always, 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 always choose the high ground. But see, we give up the high ground when we start thinking that we can reason with the unreasonable, when we can please the unpleasable. You know, I know so much time I hear people say, and I've been there too. I don't know what they think about me, or I want them to think this about me, and they're thinking this other thing. Listen, you cannot control what other people think about you. You cannot control what other people say about you. You cannot control what other people do about you or do to you. You have very little control over all of those. But you have 100% control over how you respond. That's your choice. And you can be better. You can respond with grace. You can respond with love. You can respond with kindness. You can respond with any of those Christian traits. Those things please God. Those things you're 100% in control of. Romans chapter 12, verse 14. Watch these with me. Let me just show you some real quick here. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. What? The dude that flipped me off on Kimberly today, I'm supposed to pray a blessing on him? Are you kidding me? Romans 12:17. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see that you're honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. But remember, God knows some people are not going to let you live in peace. Romans 12:21. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by what? Circle those last words. By doing good. Take the high ground. Do the right thing no matter what else is going on around you. Now, let me share one more verse with you and then we're going to pray. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 7. When people's lives please the Lord, even their enemies are at peace with them. Man, I'll tell you what, as your friend and as your pastor, man, I so want that verse to be true in your life, that I want your life to be so pleasing to the Lord that God makes even your enemies live in peace with you. Well, would you bow with me and let's pray. And I'm just going to kind of give you a model prayer, and you can just say, "Me too, God," or you can reword it quietly in your heart and pray along with me. But let me just give you kind of a guide, kind of a model prayer. And you say something like this. Father, you know who the crazy makers are in my life. And so right now I'm asking you, Lord, even when they're making me crazy, that you use it for good in my life. Even when the craziness is hurting me and causing me pain, Father, use it for the good in my life. I want to learn how to respond to suffering and persecution the way Jesus did. I want to be spiritually and emotionally mature. So, Father, help me to practice these steps this week. Lord, when people do things that offend me, help me to not take it personally. Help me to have a tender heart and a tough skin, and just not get offended by so much of what people say or the way they look at me or what, whatever. Father, just help me to look beyond the behavior, to see the fear, to see the hurt, to see the pain, to see the insecurity that's causing it. Father, give me wisdom in those relationships. Right now, Father, even without their asking, for forgiveness. I forgive the crazy makers in my life. I ask you to help me to not retaliate with gossip. Father, give me the strength to stand strong where I need to stand strong and not to be manipulated by others. And Father, I'm tired of playing games. I'm tired of playing my games, and I'm tired of playing their games. I'm tired of caving in. Father, fill me with your Holy Spirit so that I'll know what is good. I'll know what's bad, and I'll know what's appropriate for me to talk about and who I should talk about it with. Father, give me the courage to speak up and to stand up for what's right in my life and also in the lives of other believers. And in all my responses, Father, help me to take the high ground, to show love, to return good for evil. I mean, there's no way I can do this on my own. I know me. So, Father, I need your Spirit. I need your Son and his influence in my life. I need your power to do this. And so I ask you today to come into every area of my life and control every part of me this week. Father, teach me. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.